analysts we spoke to say that workers at IBM, Facebook, Federal Express, Microsoft, The Gap, and so many other corporate giants have nothing to worry about. They won't get chips soon. Consumers first, corporations second, which is why the analysts say it's going to be a while, but you will be chipped.
When Elias Brotberger goes to work, he doesn't need ID, and he doesn't need money. In fact, much of what he needs to get through the day is hidden right there, just below the surface, in his hand.
You like to touch it?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Oh, weird. Yeah, it's like a grain of rice.
Yeah, a grain of rice.
Embedded in his hand is a microchip that serves as his keys, his ID, and his wallet.
Yeah, it's all in chip, so I use it like to get around the building.
Buy snacks.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's buy some snacks.
Exactly.
So I can't open it.
No.
Okay.
So what I need to do is I need to first blip my chip, and it will log me in, and from there I get access to the fridge.
Popular TV shows like Black Mirror have imagined chips as part of a dystopian future.
Install ingrain procedure with local anesthetic and you're good to go.
In Sweden, the microchips are already here.
The microchip implants use the same technology that's in contactless credit cards.
Which have made cash pretty much obsolete in Sweden.
No cash.
At this tech fair, a chipping event for those on the cutting edge, merging their hands with this new technology.
I thought it would be fun, right?
The process is simple and swift. A pinch of the skin, and in a matter of seconds, the chip is inserted. The transformation is complete. As for the pain,
I barely felt it.
But even in this nation of early adopters, not everyone is racing to get chipped.
So let's go to the scriptures. I want to read Matthew chapter 24, verse 15 first. Let's go there. Matthew chapter 24, verse 15. And it reads, When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. So in order to figure this out, you're going to have something that's the Apocrypha. You have to get a 1611 King James Version of the Bible, which has the Apocrypha in it. The missing link to the Bible. It's the missing link. If you do not have that, you can't figure out the New Testament. You can't figure out the Gospels and why they're in that predicament. It fits the prophecies of Daniel. Let's go to the book of Daniel. Let's go to Daniel 9 and 27. In order to understand these prophecies, you have to do your research. In order to understand these prophecies, you have to have certain books to figure it out. Let's go to Daniel chapter 8, verse 19. This is Daniel chapter 8, verse 19. And it reads, And he said, Behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation. For at the time appointed the end shall be. The ram which thou sawest having two horns are the kings of Media and Persia. All right, that was a kingdom called the Persians and the Medes. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. So as you know, if you ever seen the movie 300, the movie 300 was dealing with 300 Spartans fighting against the Persians and Medes. Now the Spartans were the Macedonians, and the Macedonians became the Greeks. This is where you get the name, or the famous name, Alexander the Greek. He was a Macedonian. He was a Haggagite, like Haman in the book of Esther. So this is the lineage of Haman, the Edomite. And so when we read, and all this has to do with the chip, all of it. If you want to know what the precepts are in the chip, you have to know this. Let's go to verse 21 again. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. All right, let's go to Luke 1 and 69. And we'll come right back to that verse. Luke chapter 1, verse 69. Why is the Most High telling Daniel these things? Because it had to come to pass. This is part of Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Luke chapter 1 verse 69. And it reads, and hath raised up a horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David. Now this horn is not the same horn as the Grecian horn. We have a different horn, a different leader. As he spoke by the mouth of his holy prophets, which have been since the world began. Now these prophets were speaking about Hamashayach Yahushai. And I had to go here so you don't get confused with the horns. There's two horns. There's the evil horn, or the wicked horn of Alexander the Greek. Then there's the horn of Israel, which is Hamashayach Yahushai, the Savior of Israel. Verse 71, that we should be saved from our enemies and from the hand of all that hate us, to perform the mercy promised to our fathers, and to remember his holy covenant, the oath which he swore to our father Abraham, that he would grant unto us that we, being delivered out of the hands of our enemies, might serve him without fear. That's the point. This is why the chip cannot defeat us. Let's go back to Daniel chapter 8, and let's go to verse 22. Now that being broken, whereas four stood up for it, 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand. The policy is big. The policies are what always keep us under the thumb of our enemies. Policies. And he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against a prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. So what is this talking about? This is talking about the new demonic horn or leader on earth, which were the Greeks, which turned into the Romans, which now you have the EU and you have the United States. All of this is part of the end result of the kingdom of Edom. All right, so now let's go to Daniel. I'm going to go to Daniel chapter 11. Daniel chapter 11, verse 31. And it reads, and arms shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries. But the people that do know their power shall be strong and do exploits. And they that understand among the people shall instruct many. Yet they shall fall by the sword, and by flame, by captivity, and by spoil many days. This is talking about the children of Israel. Although we see what's coming, we don't have any might in our hands. The only might we have is the Most High, and it has to be on his time. I spoke on the missing link, which is the Apocrypha. Now, say you get a King James Apocrypha. In that Apocrypha, it has 14 books. So you got the 66 books plus the 14. Understand, when you read the Apocrypha, it speaks about many books. But it said that certain books were given to the wise. Just like Yahushua said in Matthew chapter 24, to whom who has wisdom, let him search out the mystery. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but basically that's what he was saying. You have the wisdom of the scriptures. So in the Apocrypha, you have 14 books. What you'll end up finding out about the Maccabees, that the Maccabees is in there, and you'll see the desecration about 1st and 2nd Maccabees, where they conquered Jerusalem. And it tells you that in 1st Maccabees chapter 1, how what we read in Daniel is present. It says, and it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip, The Macedonian, who came out of the land of Chittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and the Medes, that he reigned in his stead the first over Greece. So this is prophecy coming to pass. You can't understand that if you do not have the Apocrypha in the Bible, in the 66 books. No way you can find that out. So as you keep reading in this paragraph, it talks about how he had made many wars and won many strongholds and slew the kings of the earth, and went through to the ends of the earth and took spoils of many nations, insomuch that the earth was quiet before him, whereupon he was exalted and his heart was lifted up. And he gathered a mighty strong host and ruled over countries and nations and kings who became tributaries unto him. So a lot of these kingdoms that he ended up conquering end up fighting in his army. So you had different nationalities in the Greco Empire fighting for Alexander the Greek, because he had slew him and put boys. You see that today. A lot of these warlords in Africa, they'll go into other cities and they'll take all the children, all the young boys, and make them warriors.
Is it? Fire! See that? That is magic. Huh? I'm going to take that bridge. Now we are going to take that bridge. Formation! Formation! That bridge, we are taking it. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Better look me in the eyes. Who wants to fight? Aha. I'm only taking the brave. I'm not taking the scary. I'm not taking no girls. Are you ready to fight? Yes, sir. Are you ready to fight? Yes, sir. You want to take that bridge? Yes, sir. We're gonna take that fucking bridge? Yes, sir. Ibendake. Ibendake. Ibendake.
Give them guns and train them. Well, that was the same thing Alexander the Greek was doing. And that's why he was such a big homosexual, because he was training all these boys. He had his way with young men. So it says in verse 7, so Alexander reigned 12 years and then he died. So he didn't live too long. The Most High took him out. He lived long enough to conquer these nations. And his servants bear rule, every one in his place. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them many years. And evils were multiplied in the earth. That's the key. Evils were multiplied in the earth. So why weren't evils multiplied in the earth before? Because this is the worst of the heathens, pursuant to Ezekiel chapter 7. This is the worst. This was a base people that ended up becoming the rulers of the earth. They were never supposed to be the rulers of the earth. But because of our trust, because of our hard-headedness of not following our Father's laws, this happened. So as you read through this, you will see that they desecrated the temples, because we have many temples, but the main temple is in Jerusalem. They desecrated the temples, okay? And what you will see is that you have first Maccabees, second Maccabees, but what you will find out is there is a third Maccabees and a fourth Maccabees. So the third and fourth Maccabees is not in here. Why? Why is that not in here? Because he that has wisdom, let him understand. So you have to look deeper. So what comes out now is your research. So prior to the Gospels coming out, you had the Septuagint Bible. The Septuagint Bible was written to our forefathers that were in Egypt. We have our forefathers in Jerusalem, but then we had our families in Egypt too, who had forgot their language, who had forgot their native tongues and forgot their customs. And so the Gentiles, I'm giving you a story, I'm paraphrasing the story so you can get it. We had Gentiles who fell in love with us, kings who fell in love with us, also fell in love with our women. And so what ended up happening is the king of Egypt, which was Ptolemy, ended up sending word to 70 elders of the 12 tribes of Israel to bring forth the laws to the land of Egypt for our brethren who were in Egypt, and to translate it into Egyptian so they could keep their laws in Egypt. So you got to have a Septuagint Bible. This is something that's always been around. Before the 1611 King James Bible, the Septuagint was here. The Septuagint was here before Constantine. The Septuagint was here before the Roman captivity. The Septuagint was here during the Greek captivity. So the Septuagint was here. And it's written in English and in Greek. So the first thing we're going to do is go to 3rd Maccabees. And we're going to start at verse 1. And we're going to do a lot of reading here because you guys need to get the whole blueprint of how this chip came to pass. And like Daniel said, that this man would make friends with us. And that he would do what? We have to remember that this man would make peace with us in order to devise an evil scheme. And he would change everything through his policies. We have to remember that. So when you read this book of Maccabees, we have to look at the prophecies and filter it through the scriptures to get the understanding. Let's read. 1 Maccabees, verse 1. Now Philapator, which his real name was Ptolemy IV, on learning from those who came back that Antiochus had made himself master of the places which belonged to himself, sent orders to all his footmen and horsemen, took with him his sister Arsinoe, and marched out as far as the parts of Raphia, where Antiochus and his forces encamped. And one Theodotus, intending to carry out his design, took with him the bravest of the armed men, who had been before committed to his trust by Ptolemy, and got through at night to the tent of Ptolemy, to kill him on his own responsibility, and so to end the war. But Dositheus, called the son of Dremulus, these were Israelites, by birth an Israelite, afterward a renegade from the laws and observance of his country, conveyed Ptolemy away, and made an obscure person lie down in his stead in the tent. So he moved the king out of his bed and put a dummy man into that bed to be killed, because he knew that someone was plotting to kill him. It befell this man to receive the fate which was meant for the other. So we had a lot of Uncle Toms in these different kingdoms. A fierce battle then took place, and the men of Antiochus prevailing, Arsinoe, remember Arsinoe was his sister, continually went up and down the ranks, and with disheveled hair was all over the place, with tears and entreaties, begged the soldiers to fight manfully for themselves, their children, and wives, and promised that if they proved conquerors, she would give them 2 minas of gold apiece. It thus fell out that their enemies were defeated in hand-to-hand encounter, and that many of them were taken prisoners. So they won. Ptolemy IV won. Having vanquished this attempt, the king then decided to proceed to the neighboring cities and encouraged them. By doing this, and by making donations to their temples, he inspired his subjects with confidence. See that? He's making peace with many, and he's bringing policies. The Israelites also sent some of their counsel and of their elders to him. The greetings, guest gifts, and congratulations on the past bestowed by them filled him with the greater eagerness to visit their city. So he had heard about the Israelites. He was king in Egypt. after his father, Ptolemy I. So he was ready to go check out. He had heard a lot about Israel. He wanted to go see what made these people such a polished people. He had heard about our God, the Israelites, and he wanted to visit the temple. Having arrived at Jerusalem, sacrifice. This is verse 9. 3 Maccabees, chapter 1, verse 9. Having arrived at Jerusalem, sacrificed and offered thanks offerings to the greatest power, and done whatever else was suitable to the sanctity of the place, and entered the inner court. He was so struck with the exact magnificence of the place, and so wondered at the orderly arrangements of the temple, that he conceived the purpose of entering the sanctuary itself. It was so pretty, he said, I got to go and see what it looked like inside. And when they told him that this was not permissible, none of the nation, no, nor even the priest in general, but only the supreme high priest of all, and he only once in a year being allowed to go in, he would by no means give way. Then they read the law to him, but he persisted in obtruding himself, exclaiming that he ought to be allowed, and saying, be it that they were deprived of their honor, ought not to be. And he put the question, why? When he entered all temples, none of the priests who were present forbade him. See that? So this man had a lot of pride. He was used to going through people's temples and checking it out, but the Israelites wouldn't let him go in. That was our custom. Even the high priest couldn't go in but once a year to do the ceremonies. So this is what Yahushua was talking when he said, when you see the abomination of desolation, why was Ptolemy IV an abomination and of a desolation? Because he wasn't of an Israelite stock. No one could enter that holy place except for the top Israelite, the top high priest for the people could enter that. No Gentile, no man on this earth, not even an Israelite from different tribes could enter that temple. So this is what it meant by when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. It was Ptolemy IV Philapator. This man was cocky, and he was young. It reads, 3 Maccabees, chapter 1, verse 14. He was thoughtlessly answered by someone that he did wrong to boast of this. Well, since I have done this, said he, be the cause what it may, shall I not enter with or without your consent? He was boasting. He's like, can I go in or not? You gonna let me in or not? And when the priests fell down in their sacred vestments, imploring the greatest power to come and help in time of need, and to avert the violence of the fierce aggressor, and when they filled the temple with lamentations and tears, then those who had been left behind in the city were scared, and rushed forth uncertain of the event. This was serious business. He's about to wreck their whole system just by going in this temple. Our temple. This is the door to heaven. Verse 18. Virgins who had been shut up within their chambers came out with their mothers, scattering dust and ashes on their heads, and filling the streets with outcries. Women, but recently separated off, left their bridal chambers, left the reserve that baffled them, and ran about the city in a disorderly manner. Newborn babes were deserted by their mothers or nurses who waited upon them. Some here, some there, in houses or in fields. They were just leaving babies everywhere. They didn't care. They were desecrating their belief system. These now, with an ardor which could not be checked, swarmed into the most high temple. Various were the prayers offered up by those who assembled in this place on account of the unholy attempt of the king. Very, very serious. These women were serious too. These women were very serious. They would fight you. Along with these, there were some of the citizens who took courage and would not submit to his obstinacy and his intention of carrying out his purpose, calling out to arms and to die bravely in defense of the law of their fathers. They created a great uproar in this place and were with difficulty brought back by the aged and the elders to the station of prayer which they occupied before, During this time, the multitude kept on praying. The elders who surrounded the king strove in many ways to divert his haughty mind from the design which he had formed. He, in his hardened mood, insensible to all persuasion, was going onwards with the view of carrying out this design. He's going to go in. Wasn't nobody going to stop him. He had all his army. He had all his men around him. Who's going to stop him? That's why they was falling out. They was just passing out on the ground. They couldn't believe what was going on. Remember, the Most High said that our laws is something that we kept in the sight of the nations, but the temple was different. Our laws was our wisdom in the sight of the nations, but going into the temple was getting to the heart of our belief system, where we sent all our prayers up to the Father. I'm going to read 2 more verses. A lot of you don't have this book, and I'm reading it. It's not like we normally teach where we go precept or precept or precept or precept, but this is a storyline that you got to catch. You can precept things off of each one of these verses, but I want all you brothers and sisters to see the point that I'm getting at on how I broke down the scriptures from Matthew into Daniel up until the Greek captivity unto this going on. This is abomination of the desolation. And from the abomination of desolation is going to bring about something that we've been talking about, the chip or the mark. I'll say the mark, not so much the chip. I'll say the mark. Verse 27, yet even his own officers, when they saw this, joined the Jews in an appeal to him who has all power to aid in the present crisis, and not wink at such overweening lawlessness. Such was the frequency and the vehemence of the cry of the assembled crowd, that an undescribable noise ensued. Not the men only, the very walls and floors seemed to sound forth. All things preferring dissolution rather than to see the place defiled. They were doing everything. They were screaming, they were cussing, they were doing anything to keep this man from going in there. Let's go to 3 Maccabees chapter 2, verse 23. 3 Maccabees chapter 2, verse 23. And it reads, his friends and bodyguards, beholding the swift recompense which had suddenly overtaken him, struck with exceeding terror, and fearing that he would die, speedily removed him. When in course of time he had come to himself, this severe check caused no repentance within him, but he departed with bitter threatenings. He proceeded to Egypt, grew worse in wickedness. This is talking about King Ptolemy. He proceeded to Egypt, grew worse in wickedness. So, with all this being said, he didn't go in. If you read 3 Maccabees chapter 2, verse 1, it talks about our high priest, Simon, who bowed his knees and said a prayer against Ptolemy entering our holy establishment. And his prayer got answered. Ptolemy IV Philapator never entered the temple. But check this out. Watch how this evil came upon him. I'm going to finish up Simon's prayer and 3 Maccabees chapter 2, verse 20. Verse 19. Blot out our iniquities and do away with our errors and show forth thy compassion in this hour. Let thy mercies quickly go before us. Grant us peace that thee cast down and brokenhearted may praise thee with their mouth. At that time, the Most High, who seeth all things, who is beyond all holy among the holy, heard their prayer. So suitable and scourged, the man greatly uplifted with scorn and insolence, shaking him to and fro as a reed is shaken with the wind. He cast him upon the pavement, powerless, with limbs paralyzed, by a righteous judgment deprived of the faculty of speech. See this? So this man was trying to walk into the temple. The Most High just put up an invisible force field and stopped him, then slammed him on the ground. Verse 23. His friends and bodyguards, beholding the swift recompense which had suddenly overtaken him, struck with exceeding terror and fearing that he would die, speedily removed him. So they removed him. When in course of time he had come to himself, this severe check caused no repentance within him, but he departed with bitter threatening. Sound like Esau, don't it? He proceeded to Egypt, grew worse in wickedness through his before mentioned companions in wine, who were lost to all goodness, and not satisfied with countless acts of impiety. His audacity so increased that he raised evil reports there, and many of his friends, watching his purpose attentively, joined in furthering his will. His purpose was to inflict a public stigma upon our race, talking about the Israelite race, the 12 tribes of Israel race. Wherefore he erected a pillar at the tower porch, and caused the following inscription to be engraven upon it: that entrance to their own temple was to be refused to all those who would not sacrifice. See that? That all the Israelites were to be registered among the common people. That those who resisted were to be forcibly seized and put to death. You see this? That those who were thus registered were to be marked on their persons. That those who were thus registered were to be marked on their persons by the ivy leaf symbol of Dionysus, and to be set apart with these limited rights, to do away with the appearance of hating them all. He had it written underneath that if any of them should elect to enter the community of those initiated in the rites, these should have equal rights with the Alexandrians, which were Israelites too. Some of those who were over the city, therefore, abhorring any approach to the city of piety, unhesitantly gave in to the king, and expected to derive some great honor from a future connection with him. These are those who took the ivy leaf symbol. So this ivy leaf symbol was the mark. You couldn't go into the temple. You couldn't pay your tithes. You couldn't pay your tithes. You couldn't pay your offerings. You couldn't do anything unless you had this ivy leaf symbol. You couldn't worship your power unless you had the ivy leaf symbol. Okay? Did y'all get that, what I read earlier about that? Let me read that again. This is in 3rd Maccabees, chapter 3, verse 29. It says that those who were thus registered were to be marked on their persons. Didn't say in their hand or their forehead, but it said on their person, somewhere on their body, by the ivy leaf symbol of Dionysus. Now, you know Dionysus, that's another god. And to be set apart with these limited rights, a sun god or wine god or something like that. I don't care who it is, but it was a pagan god. So they got this ivy leaf symbol. And, you know, the thing about this ivy leaf, a lot of our brethren today have this ivy leaf on them because a lot of the fraternities and sororities, the Alpha, Phi Alpha, anything with that in it, has that in there. Alpha, Kappa, Phi Alpha, whatever it is, they have that symbol. They can either get that symbol tattooed on them or branded on them. And then when you look at the Ivy League schools are based after that particular god. The ivy leaf, when you look up the word ivy leaf, it's one of the most durable plants or ivies that's around. You may think that it's about to die and it starts to grow again. So this ivy, it clings from one thing to the next until it engulfs you. And so that's what this ivy leaf was all about, engulfing the Israelites. So they used this ivy leaf symbol as a mark. Let's look at Revelation chapter 13. But they had to register for this. Understand this. Revelation chapter 13. And let's read verse 15. Revelation 13 and 15. It says, and he had power to give life unto the image of the beast. What did they erect in front of our temple? An image. Okay? You couldn't get past that image if you didn't have that tattoo on you or brand on you. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. So when you read this, the ivy leaf in 3rd Maccabees is a precept to it. It's a mark. It's a symbol. It's another god. It sets people apart to certain rites. Verse 16, Revelation 13:16, and he calls it all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand. Don't say a chip, it says a mark. A mark in their right hand. But, it's synonymous with what they're trying to do, is to bring forth our RFID chip. Or in their foreheads. And that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. We already talked about who that beast was. Let's go to 1 Maccabees in the Apocrypha. 1 Maccabees chapter 1, and let's go to verse 54. 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 54. Now the 15th day of the month, Caslu, in the 145th year, they set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar, and builded idol altars throughout the cities of Judah and at every side, and burnt incense at the doors of their houses and in the streets. And when they had rent in pieces the books of the law which they found, they burnt them with fire. And wheresoever was found with any the book of the testament, or if any consented to the law, the king's commandment was that they should put him to death. So they was killing us behind the abomination of desolation, as well as later on down the line with 3rd Maccabees doing the same thing and registering us this time instead of putting us to death. And just so you know, the difference is in 1st Maccabees, that happened in the city of Judah. The second time it happened in the city of Alexandria. We had a temple there. This is why this was an issue when it happened, because they had swore that they would protect us and protect our temple when we made an oath with them. Let's go back to 3rd Maccabees, and let's look at this word marked. In the Greek, I'm going to actually record it so you can see it. All right, so I'm in Revelation chapter 13, verse 9 in the Blue Letter Bible. And I just pulled up the mark, as you can see right there. Okay. And for that particular verse, mark is going to Strong's Concordance G5480. This is in the Greek, and you pronounce that charagma. Charagma.
Strong's G5480. Charagma. Charagma.
Charagma. All right. So look at the writings or the words of charagma. Charagma. Okay. Now I'm going to take you to the Septuagint. And when you look at this in the Septuagint, that's the same word, charagma, or charagma, for marked. All right. Thus, register were to be marked on their persons by the ivy leaf symbol of Dionysus, and to be set apart with these limited rites. All right. So that's what that is. So it's the same thing as in Revelation 13 and 9. Charagma. See that? I'm sorry, not Revelation 13 and 9, but Revelation 13 and 17. Okay, so with all this being said, we thus became enemies of Ptolemy IV Philapator. We became his enemies because we still kept our beliefs in our Father, and we refused to get registered. So a lot of us ran. A lot of us escaped because if you read on in this chapter, I mean, I don't want to read the whole book. That's for you to read. But I just wanted to point out some things so you can see. But we became the enemies of state. It came to the point where people didn't even want to help us in other cities. Like in Alexandria, people didn't want to help us. They didn't want to hide us in their homes because we were deprived of all things. We were deprived of our homes, deprived of food, deprived of everything because we would not register. So it's the same thing that we see in Revelation chapter 13. If we do not take the mark, we will be deprived of everything. We will lose everything. And those who snitched on us got our property and basically turned it in and got money for it. Keep in mind of your neighbors. They will turn you in. But I'm going to read a little bit more because what's important, I want to go to, man, there's so much in this that I want to read to y'all. What's stopping me? Nothing. So I'm going to read. Okay, I'll tell you what. I'm going to read 3 pages of this. The main part is in the 3rd page that I read because it shows us what the escape route really is and why this whole function will fail. So I'm going to read not the whole page, but paragraphs. And you brothers and sisters can do this on your own now that you know where it is. So I'm going to go to 3rd Maccabees, the 4th chapter. I'm going to go to 3rd Maccabees, the 3rd chapter, verse 24. And it reads, having then received certain proofs that these Israelites bear us every sort of ill will, we must look forward to the possibility of some sudden tumult among ourselves, when these impious men may turn traitors and barbarous enemies. As soon, therefore, as the contents of this letter become known to you, because the king wrote us a letter, in that same hour we ordered those Israelites who dwell among you with wives and children to be sent to us, vilified and abused. Because this letter actually went to the people in those other lands who were neighbors of these Israelites. It says vilified and abused in chains of iron. Do you remember in the book of Esther, the same thing went on? Haman wrote a letter that went to all the parishes of the land, and that the men were supposed to take every Israelite and hang us on gallows, until Mordecai found out about it and told his niece Esther, who informed the king, who turned it around and ended up hanging all of Haman and his descendants and those who plotted with him. So it was the same thing going on here. Verse 26, it says, for by the punishment of them in one body we perceive that we have found the only means of establishing our affairs for the future on a firm and satisfactory basis. Whoever shall shield a Israelite, whether it be old man, child, or suckling, shall with his whole house be tortured to death. Whoever shall inform against the Israelites, besides receiving the property of the person charged, shall be presented with 2,000 drachmas from the royal treasury, shall be made free, and shall be crowned. So you got rich if you turn into Israelite. You got rich. We always had nations turning against us. In this particular case, we had our own brothers turning up against us. I'm going to drop down to chapter 4, verse 6. It says, girls who had entered the bridal chambers quite lately to enjoy the partnership of marriage exchanged pleasure for misery, and with dust scattered upon their mirth, anointed heads, were hurried along, unveiled, and in the midst of outlandish insults, set up with one accord a lamentable cry in lieu of the marriage hymn, bound and exposed to public gaze. They were hurried violently on board ship. The husbands of these, in the prime of their youthful vigor, instead of crowns, wore halters round their necks. Instead of feasting and youthful jollity, spent the rest of their nuptial days in wailings, and saw only the grave at hand. They were dragged along by unyielding chains like wild beasts of these. Some had their necks thrust into the benches of the rowers, while the feet of others were enclosed in hard fetters. The planks of the deck above them barred out the light and shut out the day on every side so that they might be treated like traitors during the whole voyage. So some of these brothers and sisters went back into captivity. Okay, don't get this twisted about Deuteronomy 28:68 because it can happen twice. Don't get it twisted. A lot of people will use this as a defense to prove that the Negroes are not Israelites, but that's not the case. I already proved that in the first video. All right, we have brothers going against brothers, Israelites going against Israelites. Let's go down to verse 14, and it reads, "The whole nation was now to be registered. Every individual was to be specified by name, not for that hard servitude of labor which we have a little before mentioned, but that he might expose them to the before mentioned tortures, and finally, in the short space of a day, might extirpate them by his cruelties." Understand with this particular king, think about the Greeks and the Romans, is if you wanted to die, they wouldn't let you die. And if you wanted to live, they would kill you. That's the way they dealt. That was their psychology. It was too easy to kill you if you wanted death. It was too easy. They had started to figure us out as Israelites, that we would die for our power in a minute. And so they did reverse psychology on a lot of us. And so those who wanted to die, they ended up putting us on ships with chains and fetters, rowing ships to and fro throughout the Mesopotamia ocean. All right, I'm in verse 15. So the registering was important because, remember, that's how you got the mark on you, the ivy leaf. The registering of these men was carried on cruelly, zealously, assiduously, from the rising of the sun to its going down. It was not brought to an end in 40 days. The king was filled with great and constant joy and celebrated banquets before the temple idols. His erring heart, far from the truth, and his profane mouth gave glory to idols, deaf and incapable of speaking or aiding, and uttered unworthy speech against the greatest power. At the end of the above-mentioned interval of time, the registers brought word to the king that the multitude of the Israelites was too great for registration, inasmuch as there were many still left in the land, of whom some were in inhabited houses, and others were scattered about in various places, so that all the commanders in Egypt were insufficient for the work. So you couldn't even mark all of us. There was too many of us. Just like now, it's too many Israelites to be trying to mark us. They won't be able to get us all. So that all the commanders in Egypt were insufficient for the work. The king threatened them and charged them with taking bribes in order to contrive the escape of the Israelites, but was clearly convinced of the truth of what had been said. They said and proved that paper and pens had failed them for the carrying out of their purpose. Now this was the active interference of the unconquerable providence which assisted the Israelites from heaven. So the Most High had a hand in it where they couldn't get control of us. Let me show you how powerful our prayer is. I'm going to read this last page, and I'm only going to read 4 paragraphs. But prayer is powerful, especially when it comes from the Most High's children. This is 3rd Maccabees, chapter 6, verse 9. 3rd Maccabees, chapter 6, verse 9. "And now, thou who hatest insolence, thou who dost abound in mercy, thou who art the protector of all things, appear quickly to those of the race of Israel, who are insulted by abhorred, lawless Gentiles." See that? Lawless Gentiles. Remember what in the 3 holy children, what the Most High said, what Daniel said? The 3 holy children. This is what Daniel, when they got thrown into the fire. That's what they said about the king of Babylon. The song of the 3 holy children in the Apocrypha. Chapter 1, verse 9. And thou didst deliver us into the hands of lawless enemies and most hateful forsakers of the Most High, and to an unjust king, and the most wicked in all the world. So they were the most wicked in all the world, these Edomites. Not just the Babylonians, but the Edomites. They said evils multiplied on the earth. Let's drop down to verse 16. Now at that time, Eleazar had ended his prayer. The king came along to the hippodrome with the wild beasts and with his tumultuous power. Now what they did was they took elephants and they got the elephants drunk with frankincense and some other type of alcohol. They got them drunk so they wouldn't know what they was doing when they were going to step on the children of Israel. Listen, when the Jews saw, when the Israelites saw this, they uttered a loud cry to heaven so that the adjacent valleys resounded and caused an irrepressible lamentation throughout the army. Listen closely. Then the all-glorious, all-powerful, and true power Yahweh displayed his holy countenance and opened the gates of heaven, from which 2 angels, dreadful of form, came down and were visible to all but the Israelites. So the Israelites didn't even see these angels that came down. They were dreadful angels, horrible to look at. And they stood opposite and filled the enemy's hosts with confusion and cowardice. They saw these angels and just collapsed, lost their spirit. You know how the prophets, when they saw angels, they lost their spirit. They just collapsed on the ground, face down. That's what these dudes did. And bound them with immovable fetters. And a cold shudder came over the person of the king. And oblivion paralyzed the vehemence of his spirit. They turned back the animals upon the armed forces which followed them. And the animals trod them down and destroyed them. So with that being said, the Most High, he will protect his people. Who's to say what a chip could do? A mark can't do nothing when we got the Most High on our side. Nothing. And just for you brothers who want to second this scripture, if you have the book of Josephus, Josephus also speaks on the same matter. And if you go to the New Complete Works of Josephus, translated by William Whiston and commentary by Paul L. Mayer, it reads, Against Apian, Book 2, it's Book 2 and Section 53. And this is what it reads. Accordingly, the Most High gave a remarkable attestation to his righteous procedure. For when Ptolemy Psycho, they called him a psycho, had the presumption to fight against Onias' army and had caught all the Israelites that were in the city of Alexandria with their children and wives, exposed them naked and in bonds to his elephants, that they might be trodden upon and destroyed. And when he had made those elephants drunk for that purpose, the event proved contrary to his preparations. For these elephants left the Israelites who were exposed to them and fell violently upon Psycho's friends and killed a great number of them. Nay, after this, Ptolemy saw a terrible ghost which prohibited his hurting those men. He thought he saw a ghost, but he saw 2 angels, 2 terrible angels. They came out the sky to protect Israel. Most High ain't got to do much. That ain't nothing for him to send an angel. I mean, the angel's right there. They've been watching this from day one. Armies and stuff coming out talking about that's why we couldn't get anything in the air. We couldn't shoot no missiles or anything because we were being watched. They're starting to give it up now. So, yeah, this is where the mark is. If you're looking for a precept for a mark in the scriptures anyway, it's in the 3rd Maccabees book. That's the closest thing to a mark. Having this register, Heaven is not buy and sell. It's the same thing as Revelation chapter 13. So is it going to happen again? Of course. Why wouldn't they not put that in the Apocrypha? Maybe they took it out of the Apocrypha. You ever think about that? But all praises to the Heavenly Father for enlightening the brothers and sisters with this truth. I want to bring out one last verse. Revelation chapter 2, verse 25. But that which ye have already hold fast till I come. And he that overcometh and keepeth my works unto the end, to him will I give power over the nations. And he shall rule them with a rod of iron. As the vessels of a potter shall they be broken to shivers, even as I received of my Father. The Hamashayach is paying attention to what we're doing here on this earth as well. And he said, just hold fast to what you have. You know, Revelation chapter 22, verse 14. Revelation 22 and 14, it says, blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life, and may enter in through the gates into the city. That's where we want to be. And with that, Israel, that is the reading for the day. And yes, the mark is in the Bible. And yes, it is the same mark that's in Revelation chapter 13 and 9. That's in the Septuagint and 3rd Maccabees. All right, and so I'm going to say shalom. And for you brothers out there wondering why Donald Trump is still pushing hard, is because he's just like Pharaoh. Everybody in Egypt was getting hammered by the plagues except for Pharaoh. Recognize that. Donald Trump, he got all his men, went to Tulsa. 30 of his men caught the COVID-19. With Donald Trump still doing the same stuff. It ain't even affecting him because the Most High put him in this position for a reason. It's all at the hands of the Most High, whether it be good or evil. The Most High controls it all. Recognize the Most High's hand. And with that, I'm going to say shalom.